The galaxy was vast and silent, a place where stars burned for millions of years while entire civilizations rose and fell like fleeting shadows. On the distant world of Lirith 9, the Valar were struggling to survive. Their home, once filled with sparkling rivers and green plains, now lay in ruins. A terrible plague had swept through the planet, leaving sickness and despair in its wake. Crops had rotted, animals had died, and the air smelled faintly of decay. The Valar, proud and intelligent, had always believed that the galaxy would protect them in times of need. But now that belief was shattered. Kylen, the leader of the Valar, walked slowly through the streets of the capital city, his steps echoing against broken buildings. Every corner, every empty home reminded him of what they had lost. He had seen friends, neighbors, even his own family succumb to the plague. Yet even in the face of so much death, he could not allow despair to take root. The people looked to him for guidance, for hope, but hope was scarce. This cannot be, Kylen murmured to the council that had gathered in the ruined hall of governance. We sent messages to every corner of the galaxy. We begged for aid. We pleaded for help. And still no one came. His voice cracked, the weight of a planet's suffering pressing down on him. The council members bowed their heads, their faces pale and hollow. Mothers carried children too weak to walk, whispering soothing words that felt meaningless even to themselves. Fathers stared into the distance, numb and silent, haunted by memories of better days. The plague did not only destroy bodies, it destroyed hope. And now, even the promise of the galaxy, the very alliance of worlds that the Valar had trusted for centuries, had abandoned them. Kylen's thoughts wandered to the messages he had received in the past. Responses from the Council of Worlds had been polite at first, promises of help, assessments, reports of distant fleets that would soon arrive. But as weeks turned into cycles, the words turned cold. The fleets never came. Diplomats avoided their calls. Official channels fell silent. The galaxy had turned its back, and the Valar were left alone. Night fell over Lirith 9, painting the sky with dull, lifeless stars. Kylen climbed to the top of the old observatory, where generations of Valar had once gazed at the stars with wonder. He looked out at the horizon, where gray ash clouds hovered over dead forests and cracked rivers. His people were weak, their eyes filled with fear, and yet they still lived. The stubbornness of life itself was perhaps their only strength. Then, unexpectedly, a message came through the broken communication channels. At first, Kylen thought it was another refusal. But as the words formed on the screen, disbelief struck him. It was from Earth, a small blue planet, often ignored by the galaxy's powerful councils, had heard their cries. And they were coming. Kylen read the message aloud to the council. We have seen your suffering. We will come. Do not lose hope. There was no political jargon, no conditional statements, no bureaucratic excuses, only a promise to help. For the first time in countless cycles, the Valar felt something they had not felt in a long time. Hope. The council members exchanged cautious glances. Some whispered that Earth could not possibly help. They were a minor power in galactic terms. But Kylen knew that hope was not measured by size or strength. It was measured by action, by courage, and by the willingness to step forward when others refused. As weeks passed, tiny human ships appeared on the edges of Lirith 9's orbit. They were small compared to the massive fleets of the Council of Worlds, but they carried with them something more powerful than firepower. They carried determination, compassion, and a willingness to act when the galaxy would not. Children, once too weak to lift their heads, now peered at the ships with wide eyes, sensing something different in the air. The sick whispered prayers of gratitude, unable to fully believe that help had finally arrived. Even the elders, hardened by years of disappointment and loss, allowed themselves a moment of cautious optimism. Kylen stood in the ruined square of the capital, feeling the first stirring of relief he had known in decades. Perhaps, he whispered to himself, perhaps we are not entirely alone. The thought warmed him like the first rays of sunlight after a long, endless winter. And as the human ships descended toward the planet, the Valar gathered in the streets, some crying silently, some raising their hands to the sky. They did not know what the humans would bring, or whether all would be saved. But for the first time in a long time, they felt that the universe had not completely forsaken them. A single act of compassion, from a world small in the eyes of the galaxy, had reignited a spark that no plague, no despair, could ever fully extinguish. The stars above seemed to shine a little brighter that night. And for Lyrith 9, abandoned and broken, the arrival of Earth marked the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where survival was no longer a lonely struggle, and where hope, fragile yet unyielding, could flourish once more. The human fleet emerged from the blackness of space like a promise made tangible. Their ships were smaller than the massive war fleets of the galaxy's great powers, but to the Valar they were the embodiment of hope. Every vessel carried not weapons of destruction but supplies, food, water, medicine, and engineers who were ready to rebuild what the plague and neglect had destroyed. Captain Mara Voss led the fleet. She was a tall woman, with eyes that seemed to pierce into the hearts of those she met. Her uniform was simple, not adorned with medals or insignia. She stepped onto the surface of Lyrith 9 without fear, without weapons. She carried only a medical kit and a resolve that burned brighter than any star. Kylan met her at the edge of a broken city, where the streets were lined with the sick and the dying. He had expected politeness or perhaps hesitation. He had not expected compassion. His antennas twitched nervously. Why are you here?" he asked, voice shaking with disbelief. Mara smiled softly. "Because someone has to be," she said. Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of the universe. The galaxy may have abandoned you, but Earth doesn't turn its back on those in need. We don't care about politics or who sits on the council. We care about life. Her presence alone was transformative. Children peeked from behind crumbling walls, watching her approach with cautious curiosity. Mothers wept silently, too weak to speak, while fathers lowered their heads, unable to believe that anyone could come to their aid after so long. The humans worked quickly, their movements precise and efficient, yet filled with care. They administered medicine to the sick, purified contaminated water, and distributed food to starving families. Kylan walked beside Mara as she directed her team. Every action she took, every word she spoke seemed to fill the air with hope. It was a feeling the Valar had almost forgotten. The plague had taken so much, lives, health, and faith, but the humans reminded them that there was still something worth fighting for. But the task was daunting. The plague had spread beyond containment. Hospitals were overflowing, fields were poisoned, and even the strongest Valar had grown weak from months of despair. Kylan realized that even with human help, not everyone could be saved. Still, he pressed on. Every life preserved felt like a victory, a defiance against the cruelty of the universe. In the first days, the humans moved like shadows, unseen yet everywhere, their compassion touching every corner of Lyrith 9. Engineers repaired water purifiers, medical teams taught the Valar how to administer treatments, and every survivor, no matter how frail, was given purpose. Even children found ways to help, carrying small supplies or offering comfort to the dying. Kylan observed it all and felt something he had thought lost forever. Gratitude mixed with awe. These humans were not the strongest in the galaxy, nor the most advanced, but they carried something that no technology or weapon could replicate. They carried heart. One evening, as the twin suns set behind gray clouds, Kylan watched Mara walk among the survivors. She knelt beside a young girl, weak and pale, gently holding her hand. "You are stronger than you think," she whispered. "We will help you." And in that moment, Kylan understood that the humans had come not just to heal bodies, but to heal hearts. The Valar began to respond in ways they had long forgotten. Artists who had stopped painting picked up brushes again. Teachers began to speak to students about the stars, about the dreams they had once had. Families shared stories they had hidden behind grief, finding joy in small things like sunlight on cracked streets or laughter of children who had survived. Kylan realized that Earth's help was about more than medicine and food. It was about dignity. The humans treated the Valar not as victims but as equals. They listened to their stories, learned their language, and respected their culture. They did not impose, they guided. Slowly, trust returned like the first green shoots after a long winter. Yet, despite all the hope, fear lingered. The plague still claimed lives. Not every Valar could be saved. Nights were filled with mourning, with whispers of lost friends and loved ones. But even in sorrow, there was a spark of courage, a defiance born of humanity's presence. Kylan stood at the top of the observatory. looking at the human ships under the starlight. He felt a mixture of relief and humility. They are not gods, he whispered to himself. They are something better. They are humans, and they are here for us. And for the first time in many cycles, the Valar dared to hope that the galaxy, which had turned its back, would not define their fate. Hope that survival was possible. Hope that life, even in the harshest corners of space, could be saved by courage, compassion, and determination. As the night deepened, the lights from the human ships illuminated the ruined streets, casting long shadows that danced over broken buildings. In those shadows, life began to stir again. Children slept with their stomachs full. The sick received care, and families whispered prayers not to distant gods, but to the humans who had arrived when all others had failed. Lirath 9 had been abandoned. The galaxy had turned away, but Earth had come, and in that arrival, the Valar discovered something they had thought impossible, that even in a universe full of indifference, compassion could shine brighter than despair. For a few weeks, hope had begun to bloom on Lirath 9. The children laughed again, their voices carrying across streets once filled with sorrow. Fields that had been poisoned were slowly being restored with Earth's technology. Water flowed clean and medicine reached even the most remote settlements. The Valar began to feel a sense of safety, a fragile belief that perhaps the worst was behind them. But the universe rarely allowed peace to last. Far beyond Lirath 9, in the dark reaches of space where few dared to venture, the Andrak marauders had learned of the human intervention. The marauders were ruthless pirates, known across dozens of star systems for their cruelty. They thrived on chaos, preying on worlds that could not defend themselves. And Lirath 9, now teeming with life and technology brought by the humans, was irresistible. Kylan stood on the observatory tower, scanning the sky. His antennas twitched with unease. Sensors showed dozens of incoming ships, he said quietly. They are armed, and they are coming for us. Fear gripped him in a way it had not since the plague first arrived. The thought of losing the fragile hope he had fought so hard to ignite was unbearable. Mara stepped beside him, calm and resolute. We are not defenseless, she said. Not when we fight together. Her voice carried a strength that seemed to reach into every corner of the ruined city. Kylan looked at her, uncertainty shadowing his eyes. But they are thousands strong. We are few, and many of my people are still weak from illness. Mara shook her head. Strength is not only measured in numbers. It is measured in courage, in unity, and in the will to survive. We have all three, and that is why we can win. The humans immediately began organizing the Valar for defense. Engineers adapted old factories into fortresses, creating barricades and weapon stations. Human soldiers trained the Valar in strategy and combat techniques, teaching them to fight alongside rather than beneath. Even the sick, though unable to bear arms, were given roles, tending to the wounded, relaying communications, and providing morale to those on the front lines. Kylan watched as his people transformed. The frightened, dying Valar were becoming fighters, not through force alone, but through determination. He realized that this was the true power the humans had brought, not just medicine or technology, but belief. Belief that even in the darkest hour, life could fight back. When the marauders finally arrived, the sky turned black with their ships. Explosions erupted as the first attack struck, shaking buildings and sending clouds of ash into the air. The defenders of Lirath 9, humans and Valar alike, stood firm. Every street, every ruined square became a battlefield. And yet, even amidst the chaos, there was order, a unity born of desperation, courage, and trust. Kylan led a squad of Valar fighters through the city, their hearts pounding, their eyes fixed on survival. He had never seen his people so alive, so determined. They moved as one, guided by human tactics and their own instinct, turning fear into strength. Mara was everywhere at once, coordinating attacks, tending to the wounded, and inspiring the frightened. "Do not give up," she shouted over the roar of explosions. "We fight because we must. For life, for hope, for each other." Her voice cut through the panic, reminding everyone why they were standing against impossible odds. The battle raged for days. Ships fell from the sky, buildings crumbled, and the streets were filled with smoke and fire. Yet for every Valar or human who fell, another rose to take their place. Weakness turned into courage, despair into defiance. They were no longer merely survivors, they were warriors, united by a cause greater than themselves. Kylen, standing on a barricade with Mara beside him, watched as a young Valar girl, no older than 10, guided wounded friends to safety. He realized then that the fight was not just for survival. It was for life itself, for the ability to dream again, to hope again, to believe that the galaxy could be different. By the time the Marauders were driven back, battered and defeated, Lirith 9 was scarred but alive. The humans and Valar had proved that courage, unity, and determination could overcome even the most ruthless enemies. Kylen felt pride swelling in his chest. His people had not only survived the plague, they had survived the merciless attack of the galaxy's worst. As night fell, the twin suns dipped below the horizon, and the surviving ships of the Marauders fled into the darkness. Kylen looked at the horizon, the ruins of the city around him, and whispered, "We may be small and the galaxy may despise us, but we will not be broken. Not now. Not ever." Mara stood beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You have learned something important," she said softly. "The galaxy may cast its shadow, but together, life always finds a way to shine through. That is the gift of survival, the gift of hope, and the gift of humanity." For the first time, Kylen truly understood. The humans had brought more than medicine, more than food, more than technology. They had brought courage, inspiration, and the undeniable truth that even the abandoned could rise to greatness. And on that night, under the starlit sky, the Valar and humans stood together, battered but unbroken, ready to rebuild what had been lost, and to face whatever else the galaxy might throw at them. The battle had ended, but Lirith 9 was far from safe. The streets were littered with rubble, buildings smoldered, and ash floated in the air like snow. Yet amidst the devastation, something remarkable had begun to grow: trust, friendship, and the unbreakable bond between two very different peoples. Kylen walked through the city, his antennas flicking nervously as he observed the survivors. Valar and humans worked side by side, rebuilding homes, distributing supplies, and tending to the wounded. The courage he had once thought lost in his people now shone brightly. They were no longer fragile, broken creatures struggling to survive. They were fighters, survivors, and now partners. Mara moved among them like a guardian angel. She laughed easily with the children, carried supplies with quiet determination, and offered words of encouragement to those who were too weak to believe in themselves. The Valar watched her in awe, not because of her strength or rank, but because she cared. She had shown them that compassion and courage could exist in the same body, that true leadership meant standing beside those you protect, not above them. Kylen approached a young Valar boy who had been too frightened to leave his home during the attack. The boy clutched a small wooden toy, its paint scratched and faded. "It is okay now," Kylen said gently. "The humans helped us survive. You are safe." The boy's eyes filled with tears, and he nodded, finally allowing himself to smile. Nearby, Mara knelt beside a young Valar girl, weak but smiling, as she tended to a small wound. "You are stronger than you know," Mara said softly, "and you have friends who will fight with you, who will protect you." The girl nodded, her eyes bright with hope for the first time in months. In the following weeks, the Valar and humans shared more than just work. They shared stories, meals, and laughter. Children played together in the streets, their laughter rising above the ruins. Elders shared ancient tales of the Valar's history, while humans listened in fascination. Cultural barriers faded as they discovered that kindness, bravery, and hope were languages everyone could understand. Kylen marveled at the transformation. Where fear had reigned, confidence now grew. Where grief had weighed heavily, small moments of joy began to bloom. He realized that the humans had brought more than survival. They had brought life itself back to Lirith 9. One evening, as twin suns set behind the ruined skyline, Kylen and Mara climbed to the top of the observatory. From there, the city looked both devastated and alive, a testament to survival and resilience. Kylen turned to Mara. "I have led my people for decades, and I have never seen courage like this," he said quietly. "Not from humans, not from Valar. But together it feels unstoppable." Mara smiled. "It is not about being unstoppable," she said. "It is about refusing to give up, about believing that life is worth saving, no matter how hopeless it seems. That is the strength of your people, and that is why we fight beside you, not for you." Kylen nodded. He understood then that the bond formed in the fires of battle was due. Stronger than any political alliance or treaty, it was forged in courage, respect, and mutual determination. The humans had proven that compassion was not weakness, and the Valar had proven that survival was not surrender. Together they were more than the sum of their parts. The nights were still quiet, but now they were filled with warmth rather than fear. Fires burned in the rebuilt homes and soft lights glimmered in the windows. Families gathered, sharing meals that the humans had helped provide, and stories of the battles fought and survived. The city, though scarred, pulsed with life once again. Kylan watched the children laughing in the streets, their faces bright despite the destruction surrounding them. He remembered the countless nights he had spent praying for the end of the plague, for a sign that the universe had not completely abandoned them. And now he had his answer. Not from the Council of Worlds, not from distant powers, but from the humans who had come when no one else would. In the quiet moments, Mara and Kylan often spoke of the future. "We have won today," Mara said, looking out over the city. "But tomorrow will bring new challenges, and we will face them together." Kylan agreed, feeling a deep sense of peace. For the first time, he believed that survival could lead to something more. Growth, hope, and a lasting bond that could not be broken by war, disease, or neglect. As the night deepened, the city glimmered under the twin moons. Valar and humans alike slept, knowing they were safe, if only for a moment. Kylan's heart swelled with pride, not in himself, but in his people, and in the humans who had chosen to stand with them. They had survived the plague, they had survived the marauders, and now they were beginning to thrive. And so, amidst ruins and scars, a new life began. A life built not only on survival, but on courage, trust, and the unbreakable bond between two very different worlds. In that bond, the Valar found hope again. The humans found purpose, and together, they discovered that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, life could shine brighter than any star. The rebuilding of Lirith 9 continued with steady progress. The streets, once filled with fear and silence, now carried laughter and conversation. Children ran through newly restored parks, while the sick and wounded received care that would have been impossible without Earth's help. The bond between humans and Valar had become a symbol of hope. A quiet, powerful declaration that life could persevere even in the harshest of times. But not everyone was pleased. Far beyond the planet, the Council of Worlds had been watching. For decades, they had ruled the galaxy with authority, expecting obedience and compliance. The Valar's survival, aided by humans, challenged their pride and control. They had abandoned Lirith 9 when help was most needed, and now the planet thrived without them. Kylan received the first message with a mix of anger and disbelief. The Council had arrived in orbit, their massive ships casting shadows over the planet below. Their envoys demanded an audience, offering apologies and conditional aid, all wrapped in diplomatic language meant to assert superiority. Kylan called a meeting of the Valar Council. "They abandoned us when we were dying," he said, his voice steady, though his heart burned with anger. "Do not think their arrival will erase decades of neglect." The council members nodded, their faces hardened by months of struggle and survival. The Valar had learned the true value of courage and compassion, and it was not something the council could offer now. When the envoys landed, Kylan met them in the restored council hall. The humans were present as well, standing with quiet confidence behind him. Maravos's presence sent a clear message. Earth had chosen its side, and that side was the Valar. One of the council representatives, a tall figure draped in ceremonial robes, spoke with authority. "We acknowledge your suffering," he said, "and we are prepared to assist you in rebuilding your world, under the guidance of the council, of course." Kylan's antennas twitched with controlled fury. "Assist us?" he repeated, his voice calm but sharp. "You abandoned us when we needed you most. You turned away while our children died, while our people suffered. Do not think that your presence here now erases that truth." Mara stepped forward, her voice firm and unwavering. "We don't need your guidance," she said. "Earth took the risk. Earth saved lives. We didn't ask for permission, we didn't wait for approval, and now the Valar are alive because of action, not words." The envoys faltered. They had expected submission, a quick resolution, and perhaps a ceremonial nod of gratitude. Instead, they faced unity, courage, and a moral strength that no political maneuver could undermine. The Valar had survived, thrived, and reclaimed their dignity. and it was clear that the Council's authority meant nothing compared to the courage of two worlds working together. Kylan continued, his voice rising with the conviction that had been born in fire and struggle. Your counsels and decrees mean nothing to those who are suffering. You refused to act when it mattered, and now we have learned that survival is not granted by the galaxy. It is claimed by those willing to fight for life itself. We do not need your apologies. We do not need your aid. What we need is respect, and respect is earned, not demanded. The Council representatives exchanged uneasy glances. They were powerful, but they were also fallible. And here, on a small recovering planet, they were powerless against truth. The humans and Valar stood together, unyielding and unafraid. Mara placed a hand on Kylan's shoulder and added, your people have already reclaimed their future. The galaxy can watch, but it cannot take that away. That is the gift of action, of courage, and of humanity. Kylan looked around at his people. Engineers were repairing water systems, children laughed and played in the restored parks, and families shared meals together for the first time in cycles. The Council's words seemed hollow against this living proof of resilience and hope. Finally, the Council left. Their ships ascended into orbit, and the shadow they cast over Lirith 9 slowly disappeared. But they left a lasting lesson. Actions, not authority, defined who would survive and thrive in the galaxy. The humans in Valar had shown that compassion, courage, and unity could challenge even the most powerful institutions. That night, Kylan and Mara stood atop the observatory, looking at the twin moons shining over a city that had endured and healed. Kylan spoke softly, almost to himself. We did it. Against disease, against enemies, and against neglect. We survived, Mara nodded. And we will continue to survive, she said. Because now, we know the truth. Life is worth fighting for, and together, nothing can destroy that. Kylan's heart swelled with gratitude. Not for victory, but for the humans who had stood with his people. They had taught the Valar something that no council or fleet could ever teach. That courage is born in action. Hope is strongest when shared, and the bonds of unity are unbreakable. For the first time in cycles, Lirith 9 slept peacefully. Its people, human and Valar alike, had reclaimed not only their lives but their dignity. The Council could return or ignore them. They no longer held the power to define what the Valar could achieve. And as the twin moons reflected on the streets below, Kylan knew one thing clearly. The galaxy had abandoned them, but Earth had chosen them. And in that choice, they had discovered a truth far stronger than any law. Fleet or council, the truth of hope, courage, and the unbreakable strength of life itself. Years had passed since Earth's fleet had arrived on Lirith 9. The scars of the plague and the marauders. Attacks were still visible in the cities, architecture, burnt walls, repaired streets, and new buildings standing alongside ruins. But life had returned, stronger and more vibrant than ever. The Valar had rebuilt not only their homes but their confidence, their culture, and their hope. And throughout it all, the humans remained, working alongside them as friends, allies, and family. Kylan walked through a restored park, watching Valar children laugh as they chased one another under the twin suns. He smiled, a feeling that had once been foreign to him during the darkest days of despair. The humans had taught the Valar more than medicine, technology, or strategy. They had taught them to believe in life again, to hope again, and to dream of a future beyond survival. Mara Voss walked beside him, her presence calm and reassuring. She watched the children play and felt a warmth in her heart that no battle, no challenge could ever take away. They have grown so much, she said softly. Stronger, braver, alive. Kylan nodded. They are no longer just survivors. They are builders, fighters, dreamers, and you help them remember what it means to hope. The humans had helped establish schools, hospitals, and observatories. Valar scholars worked alongside human engineers, exchanging knowledge about their planets, cultures, and sciences. Together they created innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. Even the children, once fragile and afraid, now learned to navigate the stars, inspired by tales of courage and survival. One evening, Kylan climbed to the observatory's highest point with Mara. The city below glimmered in FT lights, a testament to resilience. The twin moons reflected off the river that had been restored by human engineers. Families strolled along the streets, laughter echoing in the cool night air. It was a sight that would have been unimaginable years before. Do you think they will ever forgive the galaxy? Mara asked quietly. Kylan shook his head. Some may not. But we have learned that we do not need the galaxy to define our lives. We define our own future, and that future is brighter than anything the Council could offer. The bond between humans and Valar grew stronger every day. Festivals were held to celebrate survival, where humans and Valar danced together, sharing songs, laughter, and food. The arts flourished again, and the city became a symbol of what courage, unity, and compassion could achieve. Visitors from distant star systems came, curious about this alliance between two very different worlds. Many left in awe, carrying the story back to their own systems, spreading the legend of how a small planet named Earth had saved a species the galaxy had abandoned. Kylan often reflected on how far they had come. He remembered the despair of the early days, the silent streets, the dying children, and the hopeless prayers. And now, standing among laughter, learning, and life, he felt a profound sense of gratitude, not only to the humans who had come when all others fled, but to his own people who had refused to surrender. Mara placed a hand on his shoulder. You see, she said, hope grows stronger when it is shared. You taught us courage, and we taught you belief. Together you have created something no one else could have imagined. Kylan smiled. It is more than we ever hoped for, and yet, it feels like just the beginning. Indeed, it was only the beginning. Plans were made to expand cities, restore forests, and explore new technologies. Children who had been too weak to walk during the plague now learned to pilot small spacecraft under human guidance. Scholars mapped the stars, blending Valar knowledge with human ingenuity. Life was no longer simply about survival. It was about thriving, dreaming, and creating. One night, Kylan and Mara stood together, gazing at the stars. We were abandoned, Kylan whispered. The galaxy turned away, and yet, here we are. Stronger, united, alive, Mara smiled. And that is why humans will always rise. Not because we are the strongest or the most powerful, but because we act. When others turn away, we step forward. And when we step forward together, we can change everything. Kylan looked down at the city, glowing with life, and felt a deep, overwhelming gratitude for the humans who had come, for the courage of his people, and for the unbreakable bonds forged in fire, plague, and battle. Lirith 9 was no longer a planet of despair. It was a planet of hope, a symbol that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, life could flourish when courage and compassion guided it. And as the twin moons reflected softly in the restored rivers and streets, Kylan understood something profound. The galaxy may cast aside the weak and abandoned, but humanity, and those who choose to stand beside them, could illuminate the darkest night, rebuild the broken, and inspire the impossible. The future stretched out before them, vast and uncharted yet filled with promise, and for the first time in countless cycles, Kylan truly believed that Lirith 9's story, and the bond between humans and Valar, would shine brighter than any star. Years had passed since Earth had answered the Valar's desperate cries. Lirith 9 had transformed from a dying gray world into a thriving planet of life, laughter, and hope. The children who had once been too weak to play now ran freely under twin suns, their laughter echoing across restored streets. Families sat together sharing meals, and the arts of the Valar had blossomed once more, inspired by their shared experiences with humans. Kylan stood atop the observatory, now fully restored, overlooking the city. The glow of the lights below reflected off the river, carrying the beauty of life across every corner of the planet. Beside him stood Mara Voss, her presence as steadfast as ever. Together they watched the world they had helped save, a world that had once seemed doomed. The galaxy cast us aside, Kylan whispered, his voice thick with emotion. They turned their backs when we had nothing. They left our children to die. Mara placed a hand on his shoulder. And yet here we are, she said softly. They left you behind, but we did not. That is what matters. That is humanity. We rise when others fall. We fight when others flee. And together, we create what others say is impossible. Kylan looked at the young Valar children running below, their faces bright with curiosity and wonder. It is more than survival, he said. It is life. It is joy. It is hope. You didn't just save our people. You reminded us why life is worth fighting for. Mara smiled. No, you reminded yourself. We just helped you see it. Across Lirith 9, humans and Valar moved together as equals. Scholars exchanged knowledge. Artists inspired one another. And engineers built wonders that neither species could have imagined alone. The city, once a place of despair, was now a beacon of collaboration, courage, and resilience. Visitors from distant star systems arrived, curious about the alliance between humans and Valar. They watched in awe as two very different peoples shared their knowledge, their lives, and their hopes for the future. Stories spread throughout the galaxy of a small planet that refused to abandon another. Stories of courage and compassion that outshone the cold power of fleets and politics. Kylan often thought back to the first days, when the streets were empty, the hospitals full of dying, and the Council of Worlds had ignored their pleas. He remembered the despair that had once weighed on him like a stone. And now he saw proof that courage and compassion could outshine the greatest darkness. One night, as the twin moons reflected on the restored rivers, a young human child approached Kylan. Her eyes were wide with curiosity. "Why did your people need help?" she asked. Kylan knelt down, looking into her eyes. "Because we were abandoned," he said. "No one came when we called. But then humans came, and they did not look away. They showed us that even when the galaxy turns its back, life can rise again. They taught us courage, and they gave us hope." The girl nodded, understanding more than her years might suggest. "So humans are special?" she asked. Kylan smiled. "Humans are special because they choose to act when others would not. Because they fight for what is right, even when the odds are against them. That is why they will always rise." Mara stood beside him, placing a hand over his. "And now," she said, "we leave a legacy. Not of war, not of conquest, but of life, hope, and unity. That is what the galaxy will remember. Not the power of the Council, not the threats of marauders, but the courage of humans who refuse to abandon another world." Kylan looked out at the horizon, at children laughing, families thriving, and scholars studying the stars. "We have survived the plague, the marauders, and the galaxy's indifference," he said softly. "And yet we are stronger than ever. Our story will echo across time, a testament to courage, hope, and the unbreakable bonds forged between worlds." Mara smiled, watching the twin moons cast gentle light across the city. "It is more than a story," she said. "It is proof. Proof that when the galaxy abandons, humanity does not. That is what makes us unstoppable. That is why we will always rise, even against all odds." Kylan nodded. He felt pride, gratitude, and a deep, unshakable peace. The Valar had survived because of humanity. Yes, but more importantly, they had learned to survive themselves, strengthened by courage, compassion, and the unbreakable bond they shared with their human allies. The city was quiet now, but it was a peaceful quiet, filled with life and promise. Somewhere in the distance, children laughed, scholars debated, and families shared stories of courage and survival. The stars above shone brighter than ever, reflecting the triumph of life over despair. The galaxy may have cast the Valar out. It may have ignored their cries, turned away from suffering, and left destruction in its wake. But Earth had chosen differently. Earth had answered when no one else would. Earth had brought hope where there was none. And in that act, two worlds had forged a bond stronger than fear, stronger than death, and brighter than any star. Kylan looked at Mara one final time. "We were abandoned," he said softly. "The galaxy forgot us. But humanity did not, and because of that, we will never be forgotten again." And as the twin moons glimmered over the thriving city of Lirith 9, the Valar and humans stood together, alive, victorious, and united, proof that courage, compassion, and hope could shine brighter than any darkness. For the galaxy may cast others aside, but humanity always rises.